millimoles per liter and under used to define hypoglycemia in the past. Things have changed now and that level is lower, but it's not as simplistic as it sounds because it depends on other factors. So is this an at-risk baby you're dealing with, or is this a baby that has got a diagnosis already of something significant? If the baby is well and well grown, then it's a different threshold. So it's important to not just look at the number, but also to think about the circumstances surrounding that particular baby that you're managing. So it's also important for you to ascertain how that blood glucose measurement was made. I know some of you talk about BMs. It's a term that I hate because actually what we're talking about is blood glucose measurement, not stick glucose. It is important that the way that the blood glucose is measured is taken into account. So it should be a true blood glucose because that is the standard that is used to define hypoglycemia. So not stick glucose, but a true blood glucose measurement, usually from a blood gas, and there will be blood gas machines in all A&Es, so you should be able to get that. So the British Association of Perinatal Medicine defines hypoglycemia as a level that is less than 2 millimoles per liter in a well baby without any at-risk factors. Now, clearly, it's important then for you to know what the risk factors are for babies who have got hypoglycemia. And we'll talk about that in a moment. But it's also important to determine whether the baby has got symptoms and signs that you can attribute to hypoglycemia because your threshold then changes, particularly if the baby has got neurological symptoms, at which point the threshold will be 2.5 millimoles per liter. In particular, if the values are very low, less than 1 millimole per liter, then you will need to manage that baby quite urgently. So it's important to think about not just the number or the level that you get, but also the risk factors, and particularly if this is a second measurement rather than just the first one when you take over the management of the baby. When it comes to the diagnosis of hypoglycemia, it's important to think of the at-risk baby. And we put this in different categories to help. So the first group of babies are at risk are babies who have got decreased glucose stores and impaired gluconeogenesis. So in this group of babies will be babies who are restricted for their gestation, babies who are moderately preterm, and babies whose mothers have had certain drugs during pregnancy, particularly beta blockers. And then the other big group of babies are babies who've got reduced intake because of poor feeding. And then you think of another group of babies that have got increased glucose utilization. So they might be taking adequate intake, but they're using up the glucose rather frequently. And these are babies who are cold, babies who are born again to diabetic mothers or mothers who've had diabetes. So not necessarily had a diagnosis of diabetes, but had diabetes during the pregnancy. And babies who have suffered HIE. And you think HIE, but I mean A&E, but well, babies can come into